Margaret Whitmore had perfected the art of demanding perfection. At 73, she sat in her Manhattan penthouse like a queen surveying her kingdom, surrounded by crystal that caught the afternoon light and furniture that cost more than most people's homes. But today, as she waited for her new butler to arrive, something felt different. Maybe it was the way her granddaughter Emma's voice had cracked over the phone last week, saying she couldn't visit anymore because Grandma's house felt too cold. Maybe it was the hollow echo of her own footsteps in rooms that once buzzed with family gatherings. Or maybe it was simply that after burying 3 husbands and watching her children scatter across continents, Margaret was tired of being surrounded by beautiful things that couldn't love her back. The doorbell rang at precisely 3 p.m. Just as she'd requested from Elite Domestic Services. Margaret smoothed her Chanel suit and practiced her stern expression in the hallway mirror. She'd been through 17 butlers in 5 years, each one dismissed for some imperfection. This time would be different. This time, she'd found the most expensive service in the city, one that promised 5-star luxury staff for discerning clientele. She opened the door expecting to find a pristine gentleman in a pressed uniform. Instead, she found herself staring at a man in his early 30s with calloused hands and worried eyes, holding a battered harmonica in one hand and the tiny fingers of a barefoot 4-year-old in the other. "Mom," the man said, his voice carrying a slight southern drawl, "I'm so sorry we're late. I'm Jake Morrison, and this is my son, Tommy." "I think there might be some confusion." "There certainly is," Margaret interrupted, her voice sharp as winter wind. "I ordered a professional butler, not a vagrant with a child." Tommy peeked out from behind his father's legs, his dark eyes wide and curious. His clothes were clean but worn, patched at the knees, and his feet were indeed bare despite the October chill. Jake's cheeks flushed red. "Mom, I can explain. I was supposed to drop Tommy off at daycare before coming to fix your kitchen faucet. To Elite Services sent me for plumbing work. But the daycare had a water main break, and I couldn't find anyone to watch him on such short notice. My regular babysitter is sick." And he stopped, running a hand through his tousled hair. "Look, I know this looks unprofessional. I can come back another time." Margaret was about to slam the door when Tommy spoke up in a voice soft as dandelion seeds. "Pretty lady, why are you sad?" The words hit Margaret like a physical blow. She looked down at this barefoot child who had somehow seen through her carefully constructed armor in seconds. "I'm not sad," she said, but her voice came out smaller than intended. "Your eyes look like my daddy's did when Mama went to heaven," Tommy said matter-of-factly, then brightened. "But Daddy says music makes sad eyes happy. Want to hear our song?" Before Margaret could respond, Jake had lifted the harmonica to his lips, and the most beautiful, haunting melody filled the marble entryway. It was Amazing Grace, but played with such tenderness and skill that it seemed to wrap around Margaret's heart like a warm blanket. Tommy began to hum along, his small voice pure and sweet, and suddenly Margaret's penthouse didn't feel quite so empty. When the music faded, Margaret found herself blinking back tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed in years. "That was lovely," she managed. Jake lowered the harmonica, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Mom." Tommy gets excited about music, and I should have you come in, Margaret heard herself saying. "Both of you." Jake hesitated. "Mom, I really should just fix your faucet and go. I don't want to impose with Tommy here." But Margaret was already stepping aside, surprising herself. "Nonsense. It's cold outside, and that child has no shoes." As they entered, Tommy's eyes grew wide as dinner plates, taking in the crystal chandelier, the Persian rugs, the oil paintings in golden frames. "Daddy," he whispered loudly, "is this a castle?" "Something like that," Jake murmured, clearly uncomfortable among such wealth. Margaret led them to the kitchen, where a steady drip from the sink had been driving her mad for weeks. As Jake knelt to examine the faucet, Tommy wandered the kitchen, careful not to touch anything but fascinated by everything. "Mom," Jake said, looking up from under the sink, "this is an easy fix, but I need to run to the hardware store for a part. Would it be okay if I came back tomorrow? I'll make sure to arrange childcare." Or, Margaret heard herself saying, "You could leave Tommy here while you go to the store. I'll watch him." Jake's eyebrows shot up. "Mom, I couldn't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." The truth was, Margaret hadn't been alone with a child in decades, and the prospect terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. But there was something about Tommy's unguarded smile, the way he'd seen her sadness without judgment, that made her want to try. Jake looked torn. "He's a good kid, but he's only 4, and he can be a handful. I raised 3 children of my own," Margaret said with more confidence than she felt. "I think I can manage one small boy for an hour." After much hesitation and detailed instructions about emergency contacts and snack preferences, Jake finally left for the hardware store. Margaret found herself alone with Tommy, who stood in her pristine living room like a small tornado waiting to happen. "What would you like to do?" she asked awkwardly. Tommy considered this seriously. "Can we make cookies?" "Mom, I used to make cookies when it was cold outside." Margaret's kitchen hadn't been used for baking in years. She employed a chef for entertaining and mostly ate catered meals when alone. But something about Tommy's hopeful expression made her nod. What followed was the messiest, most joyful hour Margaret had experienced in years. Tommy insisted on measuring ingredients himself, resulting in flour everywhere and eggshells in the bowl. He chattered constantly, telling her about his pet goldfish, his favorite cartoon, and how his daddy played harmonica every night to help him sleep after Mama died. Mama got sick in her tummy, Tommy explained as he stirred chocolate chips with intense concentration. The doctors tried to fix her, but they couldn't. "Daddy says she's watching us from the stars now." Margaret's throat tightened. "How long ago did your mama go to the stars?" 10 moons, Tommy said, holding up all his fingers. "Daddy says we have to take care of each other now." As the cookies baked, filling the penthouse with warmth and sweetness it hadn't known in years, Tommy discovered Margaret's baby grand piano. "Can you play music like Daddy?" he asked. Margaret hadn't touched the piano since her last husband's funeral 5 years ago, but she found herself sitting on the bench with Tommy beside her. Her fingers found the keys hesitantly, playing a simple melody she remembered from her own children's bedtime routines. Tommy clapped with delight and began making up words to her tune, something about friendly castles and pretty ladies and cookies that tasted like sunshine. His uninhibited joy was infectious, and Margaret found herself laughing for the first time in months. When Jake returned with the faucet part, he found them on the living room carpet, eating still warm cookies and playing an elaborate game involving Margaret's decorative pillows as mountains and Tommy's imaginative stories about brave knights and friendly dragons. "Tommy," Jake said, clearly mortified. "Get off Mrs. ... I'm sorry, I don't even know your name." "Whitmore," Margaret said, not moving from her spot on the floor. Margaret Whitmore. And Tommy was no trouble at all. Jake stared at her, this elegant woman in designer clothes, sitting cross-legged on a Persian rug worth more than his truck, flour still dusting her sleeve, laughing at his 4-year-old's silly jokes. "Actually," Margaret continued, "I was wondering if you might consider a different arrangement." Jake tensed. "Mom, I need help around here," Margaret said, the words coming easier than she'd expected. "Not just with repairs, but with living. This place is too big, too quiet, too perfect. I need someone who isn't afraid to make it messy, to make it feel like a home again." She looked at Tommy, who was now examining her crystal paperweight collection with intense curiosity. "And I think Tommy needs somewhere he can run around, play music, make cookies without worrying about the mess." Jake's expression was unreadable. "Mom, I'm not qualified to be a butler or a—" "I don't want a butler," Margaret interrupted. "I want family." The word hung in the air between them, fragile and full of possibility. "My granddaughter says this place feels too cold," Margaret continued. "Maybe it needs the warmth of a father who plays harmonica lullabies and a little boy who believes in friendly dragons." Tommy looked up from the paperweights, his face bright with understanding beyond his years. "Pretty lady, do you want to be part of our family too?" Margaret felt her carefully constructed walls crumble completely. "Very much," she whispered. Jake's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Mama Margarita, we don't have much to offer. We're still figuring out how to be a family of just the two of us." "Then maybe," Margaret said softly, "we can figure out how to be a family of three." 6 months later, the penthouse buzzed with life in ways Margaret had never imagined. Tommy's artwork covered the refrigerator, his toy trucks parked next to her Waterford crystal, his laughter echoing off walls that had been silent too long. Jake had transformed from a struggling single father into a man who smiled more than he worried. His harmonica concerts now a nightly tradition that drew even the doorman upstairs to listen. Margaret's granddaughter Emma visited every weekend now, drawn by the warmth she'd been missing, delighted to have a little brother to play with and teach. The house that had once been a monument to perfection became a testament to perfectly imperfect love. And sometimes, when the three of them sat together in the evening, Margaret at the piano, Jake with his harmonica, Tommy singing made-up songs about their adventures, Margaret would remember the woman who had ordered a 5-star butler and gotten something infinitely more valuable instead. She had learned that the best things in life come barefoot, with flower-dusted smiles and hearts brave enough to see past the sadness in an old woman's eyes. She had discovered that family isn't about bloodlines or bank accounts, but about choosing each day to love the people who make your house feel like home. Margaret Whitmore had spent 73 years perfecting the art of demanding perfection. But it took a single father with a harmonica and his barefoot boy to teach her that the most beautiful music comes from hearts willing to harmonize with whatever love walks through the door.